One.
Where is, oh, that one.
You're recording.
It records uploads. Okay. Cool. All right, cool. We have a couple people. Hi there. How you doing? I'm Sam.
I'm Austin. Ellis, how are you guys?
We're just waiting for a few more, so that's 3. We're doing it on Google Hangout. Next time we do this, will probably be on Zoom. I figured we'd just start with this. We'll give it a few minutes, waiting for everybody to get in. Let's see here. Hopefully there's a place. I'm going to write a comment. Just wrote a comment. If you can post back if you see that, that would be helpful, because we hope to get more questions from you if things come up as we're talking about things, or if you need a little more clarity in what we're talking about. We want to hear from you. So I wrote something up on the YouTube channel. All right, sorry. It's hopefully you're seeing the YouTube link. I don't know if you're looking at the Google Hangout broadcast or if you're actually seeing this on YouTube. So let us know. Oh, there we go. Abby, okay. So perfect. So you can see there's a comment box there. We'll just wait for a couple minutes, see if anybody else trickles in. Or we just posted up the link like 30 minutes ago.
So what we'll do real quick is we'll just we'll start by introducing ourselves, give a little background. Sam and I started working together about 5.5 years ago. We were in school together actually, and then we started working at Lifestar in Las Vegas and did a lot of work together, helping people in the group context and couples therapy. At the time I was the director of Lifestar, and Sam was one of the top facilitators and therapists who's always been passionate about helping couples and really pushing the envelope of how do we help more people. After that, I moved to Addo Recovery and became a director of therapist development there, training other therapists. And Sam became a clinician at Addo in Las Vegas and helped with a lot of the couples concepts that we were putting into place. Both of us very passionate about recovery, and really everything we're after is creating solutions. So often people get theory and they get what might work, and it doesn't always translate into healing the relationship. And so our hope is to really give solid things that can be put into place that will begin to heal the relationship. Let Sam tell a little bit about himself.
Yeah, so my whole goal is I love the couples aspect of healing, because I think I actually lean towards working with couples more than the individual. And there's a place for both, but I think because of what we learned, we've studied EFT, so emotionally focused therapy, which is the fastest and most effective approach to work with couples. And it works so well actually with couples who struggle with an addiction and trauma, because the base is about attachment, it's about repairing connection, it's about feeling close. And that model is the approach that helps couples to create those moments of closeness faster than any other model. And so I love working with couples, and I think there's so much power, especially when it comes to this particular struggle that people have, which is addiction. And so our goal is to get people what they need as fast as possible. Like, we don't want people to have to be in therapy for 5 years and still having a hard time staying sober, still getting triggered all the time. Like, there's a better way to do it. And so we're going to share a couple of things. I wanted to go over a few of the things we're going to cover tonight. So number one, many people have a question. Does he have to heal first before we work on the relationship? Or do I have to heal first? Do I have to control, or does she have to work through trauma enough to be able to work on the relationship? So that's one of the things we're first going to address. The next one is, how do you overcome the effects of the acting out? How do you overcome the trauma, the painful memories of the past, feeling triggered? How can you use the relationship as a strength to be able to support you instead of you having to do this all by yourself, you can actually leverage the relationship and invite him to be able to help support you in those moments, which actually helps you work through it faster. Another thing that we're going to talk about is how to develop trust in somebody who has been dishonest. Next, we're going to cover how do you avoid getting stuck in the same fights? Because so often this is the case for couples where you get stuck, it's the same argument, it's the same fight, or it's the same way or pattern of fighting, but it's just a different topic. We're going to cover what to do in those moments. The last couple of things are what to do when you want to build intimacy, build closeness, and build connection, but you feel afraid and you get triggered and there's the impulse to pull back, or she has that impulse to pull back. And lastly, what do you do if you do not have a spouse who is willing to help you in this recovery process?
So one of the things that is really important, and I just want to start with this, is we hope that from this webinar, you leave with a sense of hope. Sam and I have had the fortunate opportunity to work with many couples who they go the whole road of healing their relationship fully. Earlier today, I was working with a couple, and they said when we started, we didn't think the relationship could become better than it ever has been. We want you to know that as you work together as a couple, you can build the marriage that you want. You can reclaim friendship, closeness, flirtatiousness, sexual intimacy that's healthy. You can become best friends, and I know that seems scary for a lot of people, but it's important to believe that your relationship can heal, the addiction can heal, and the trauma can heal. One of the things that allows me to know that is I've been through my own recovery journey. Me and my wife have worked really hard to build a relationship that is fulfilling and happy, and where we're friends and where we can meet each other's needs, and we can bring up difficulties and we can respect each other and talk about it. And it was a long, hard road for us, and I learned a lot along the way, and a lot of the things that Sam and I will be teaching are things that I learned along the journey. Sam, obviously, he's married and he has a journey. It's different than mine, but we've had to walk the walk and build a relationship that works. One of the difficulties in this type of setting is, and I see this a lot in mental health, a therapist will say something to a specific individual and it will get almost like interpreted that that's for everybody. And one of the things we know as therapists is it's case specific. People are different, relationships are different. So as you watch this, our hope is you can kind of take in what resonates with your relationship and recognize that some of the things we're suggesting are based on some questions we've received that may not be your situation. The other piece that's really important here is me and Sam are going to be talking about common misconceptions. We work from an attachment framework, which we're going to explain a little bit more, but one of the biggest struggles I see in having people heal their relationship is basically everything, every character weakness, every struggle someone has gets lumped into them being an addict. So, for example, if I have a bad day and I'm stressed out and I'm a little bit irritable, that can be put on as, well, that's because you're an addict. In fact, when I was in recovery, some of my trauma responses from childhood, the ways I'd react or the fear I'd get or whatever, like I was told that's because you're an addict. And what I learned in my recovery was I had pain that created perceptions for me that made me fear certain things, fear rejection, fear abandonment. So it's important to understand that every aspect of that's negative about your husband or about you if you're a man, it's not because you're an addict. You have become addicted, and we have to work on healing that. But your person is not an addict. Partners, you felt trauma, pain, right? We use this term betrayal trauma, and you'll respond in trauma. Even that trauma response doesn't define you. And this is such a key message, because when people believe that the man is an addict, it doesn't allow for healing, because our only perception is you're a bad person, or for the wife, you're scary to me, and how can I ever connect with you if you're this scary, addict monster? So our hope here is to really show that people who struggle with addiction are not necessarily bad people. And this addiction doesn't have to define them. Again, I see people all the time overcome addiction and heal, and we want that message to be clear.
So a part of what we want to start with is describing the reasons why couples get stuck. And so I think the number one thing that creates a stuck place in a relationship is a lack of emotional connection. And that's so crucial because that's how we're wired. Like you think about infants and toddlers, they're so dependent for so long that nature has hardwired into us this survival system. So it's like I have a 2-year-old, and she can't go very long without coming to check in. She can't go very long without wanting to be held or reassured or comforted, and that's by design. And we don't actually outgrow the need for somebody else to reassure us and support us and to build us up. I think there's especially in the recovery community, there's this dirty word of codependency. And I think it's just a distorted understanding of the natural attachment needs that we have to feel loved, to feel accepted, to belong. And when people truly understand that that's actually a healthy thing, it's a healthy thing to want to turn to your spouse for comfort or to hear from them, hey, a reminder of, hey, yes, you are enough. Yes, I do care about you. Yes, I am proud of you. That reassurance is so powerful to our nervous system, to our brains, to our emotions, because that's exactly how we're wired. We're not designed to be alone. Like you don't see people living out as individuals on these islands. You see people living in families and in communities and in neighborhoods. And that social structure is so important. And so the reason why couples get stuck is because when they lose that emotional connection between themselves, that's when these negative patterns show up. And we're going to talk some more about that today. But
and real quickly along those lines, one of the things that I see so often in my practice is couples will learn to turn to each other, and they almost start to feel bad for like caring for each other. They start to feel like they are codependent. Like I'm a rescuer if I'm there for my partner, if I love them when they're hurting. So often people give each other this message of, I'm not here for you. You got to go figure it out. And we're not built that way, right? When we're feeling pain, when we're hurting, we need someone else. I often tell my couples, right, like if life is good and I'm happy, like it's cool to have my partner here, but I don't need it. I'm okay, life is good. It's when I'm in pain, it's when I'm scared, it's when I'm having a rough day, right? It's when life is happening, that's when I need someone else. And so often in the recovery context, couples start to turn, right? And they go, I can't be here for you. You're not safe. And then you can't bond. You can't be friends again. So we really want to talk about how to bypass that. It's scary and it can be tricky, but it's an important aspect of healing the relationship.
that's right.
So the next piece that we hear a lot all the time, and it's something Sam and I really don't love. And there's a reason for it, but it's this idea of each of you need to go heal first and then work on your relationship. And, we see so many people that do this. He goes to, 12-step for 2 years, and he might even like get sober and get in a good spot, but that doesn't build trust. A lot of times guys, actually I'll tell you, I was in a 12-step, I was attending it as someone struggling with addiction probably 9 years ago. And I was so baffled because all these guys are going, I'm 2 years sober and my wife's divorcing me. I didn't understand that at the time. And what I've learned in the time since is being sober doesn't mean you know how to connect. It doesn't mean you know how to meet one another's needs. So there's this thing I draw for my clients all the time. And the idea here is this is baseline marriage, okay? Right. Don't lie to me. Right? Don't betray me. Don't act out sexually. Don't verbally abuse me. Don't neglect me or withdraw from me. Right? And unfortunately, the pain of addiction is all these things happen. Right? And then what begins to happen is people really focus on this sobriety thing. Right? Hey, I'm sober. I haven't acted out for a while. And there's this expectation of like, we should be okay. Well, remember, this is baseline. This is expected. right? Even trust. Like trust is right here. And what we're after in a marriage is this line: connection, right? Friendship, closeness. And so a lot of what we're talking about tonight is how do we get up here? How do we start taking steps to get to good life again, good marriage, good friendship? If we just focus on getting sober or even just getting trust, we need trust to get connected. But even getting trust isn't enough. I can trust someone, but not fully bond with them. And obviously, we need to focus on trust first. So this principle is going to be really important for both people in recognizing our goal is not just to get back to sobriety. And so much of individual work becomes focused on sobriety. And so we believe that working together is the way to heal a relationship. Even if I'm working on overcoming my addiction, if I can turn to my partner and share, like, today was a really hard day, I felt triggered or I felt, tempted or whatever. And here's the things that I did to overcome it. And here's why I think it happened. I think I was feeling shame because of something that happened, at work. Then you're doing this together. And I'm not saying, partners, it's your job to do the work for him or rescue him, but then you're in on the growth. You're seeing that he's changing. Same thing real quick with trauma work, right? So often the guys I work with, they care about their wives, they see their pain, and they're like, sorry, you're in trauma. Hope you figure that out, right? And every woman I've ever worked with, every woman says, I want him to understand what he's done. And part of the reason is if he understands what he's done and he cares about that, then I can start to have some reassurance and some safety that if he understands what he's done, maybe he will be able to not do it again. Okay. And so when couples can begin to work together on life, right, then you can begin to heal. Really, one more quick thought on that. I remember a couple came in and the guy did 90 meetings in 90 days, and he was feeling good, and he was getting his bucket filled every day, and more sobriety than he'd ever had, which was awesome. And I asked the partner how she felt about it, and she said, it's no different than when he was an addict. She said when he was an addict, he was gone and not available. He said now he goes to work, he goes to his meeting, he goes and hangs out with guys, and I still don't have a husband, right? She said, I want a husband, not a sober guy that's gone with other guys all the time. And so uniting together and going, what's the marriage we want? What's the vision for our future? And kind of giving this good faith. I want to work on it. You want to work on it. What are we going to do to build this marriage? Me as the man, I want to be there for your pain. I want to help that. And I'm going to ask for your patience as I learn and grow and really fight this addiction.
Okay, so the next thing we want to move into is how do you use the relationship to work through the trauma? Because so often it's very easy for the partner to want to work through it by themselves, right? They get triggered, they can turn to their group, which is great. They do mindfulness, which is great. Journaling, all that stuff is so important. And the thing that we want to add to that is to be able to use the relationship in order to even more quickly resolve some of the fears that come up or some of the old memories. And so one of the questions that we got was, what do you do when you're constantly reminded of whether it's an affair partner or his previous acting out or his previous unavailability? That triggers this sense of trauma. It triggers this uncertainty. It triggers all sorts of stuff, fear, sadness, pain. And so in those moments, there's two things that we want to focus on here. Number one is how, for the husbands who might be watching, how do you repair the pain of the past and do it in a way that the past can be in the past? Because so often one of the main concerns that the guys have is she is never going to get over this. Like, I keep hearing about this over and over. It hasn't happened in years, but yet it's still constantly brought up. And a part of why that happens for guys is the fact that it's constantly brought up is because the pain of that has not been healed. And so in order to fully heal the pain, there's like 4 things that I'd like to include in this, like the 4 steps. If you follow these 4 steps and you do them consistently, the guys, if the damage has been done by him, or the girls in maybe in other contexts, if you follow these things, this creates this repair. And once emotions are processed and are able to be organized in a way that makes sense to us, and the pain of it is seen and validated, we don't have to keep bringing it up anymore. And I remember listening to a brain researcher who talked about unprocessed emotion leads to this loop in the mind where it constantly is there, it constantly gets reminded and triggered. But once emotion is validated and seen and processed through in an effective way, and somebody's able to support you in it, the mind is able to let that go because there's a resolution. So in order to fully process through some of this old pain, the first step is to admit responsibility. And this is this can be a really tricky thing for especially some of the guys, because it's painful to admit I hurt my wife. It's painful to admit I did something that damaged another human being. And so the easiest way out of that is to blame, or it's to minimize, or it's to deny. And that's one of the most common places that the guys get stuck, is not admitting, hey, I made a mistake. What I did hurt you. And this was wrong. I made a wrong decision, or I made multiple wrong decisions, and what I did caused you pain. So once you admit responsibility, the second thing that you can do is acknowledge the emotional pain that the other person's experienced. And you can say, when this happened, or when I texted this person, or when I watched pornography, or when I did whatever the thing that caused the damage, I can see how badly that hurt you. I can see that you don't trust me anymore. And I understand why, is because I betrayed your trust and I wasn't honest. And what I did has caused you pain. And being able to be validated like that is so crucial. Again, going back to this attachment idea, we need somebody else to help calm our brains down, because we feel strongest when we're together. And so there's no faster way to repair pain than to engage the husband in this process to help him comfort that in a way that brings resolution. So him acknowledging that pain is going to be a big part of that process. The third step is it kind of piggybacks off the second step, is just to apologize. Validate how much pain that this action caused you. Apologize that happened. And then the fourth step is to resolve to do something differently and say, this is what I realized led me to that decision. This is what I realized was not in place for me. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I felt like inadequate at work, let's say. I felt like I was, I keep getting reminded that I keep failing in so many of my responsibilities. My responsibility as a husband, I can't seem to measure up. There was so much pain there that I did this, X, Y, or Z, whatever behavior. And in order to make sure that doesn't happen again, this is what I'm going to do. And then they come up with some kind of an action plan. And so once he takes responsibility, acknowledges the pain, apologizes, comes up with an action plan, there's a different feeling with that than when couples get stuck and if it's him, he can turn within himself and go into shame or blame, like I said, or minimize. That just leaves you even more alone. That just leaves you even more disconnected, which is the opposite of what you need.
Let me just add to that real quick. One of the things I see in my practice is when a man gets that he's hurt her and he cares about that and he's not getting blocked by his shame, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, that's when I see couples heal. And it can happen fairly rapidly. When she feels like you get that you hurt her and you're committed to preventing that in the future, and that you care and you love her, women begin to heal, relationships begin to heal. I will tell you that time will not heal this. It won't. One of the very first couples I saw when I was in school, an affair had happened 3 years earlier, and he hadn't repeated it, but that time did not help it. What we see is this pattern that Sam talked about happening, not a million times, but like reiterating that care when a trigger happens. And just real quick, in my own recovery, I remember I don't know how wise I thought I was at the time, but I just felt it was the right thing to do. There were unprovoked times where my wife wasn't triggered, where she wasn't having a trauma response, And I was thinking about like the past, and I was gaining more clarity of like, man, I must have really hurt her. I was so in my addiction fog that I couldn't really fully empathize. And as I got more and more healing, there were just days where I was like, oh my gosh, this woman I love, I like really hurt her. And I started to become aware of it. And so unprovoked, I would just go to her and I would just say, hey, I love you, and I see that I really hurt you, and I'm just sorry I made that mess, and I want you to know that I'm working every day just to never go back there because you're important. And that, I think that sincerity, because I truly love my wife and I truly wanted to be different. And I think doing that allowed us to heal because she felt like I really cared about her. And so, you guys, whoever's watching, and women, if your husbands aren't watching, you want to show this to them. Like, Sam and I 100% see that when a man engages a partner's trauma and he takes it on himself to say, I caused this, I'm going to fix it. When that happens, couples heal. Partners, when you're left, and you know this, when you're left to try and heal your trauma on your own, it doesn't fully get there. You might manage your trauma responses, but you're still alone with your pain. And so, men, like, this is crucial. If you want your relationship to heal, learning to be there with that pain.
So one thing that we want to, there's a concept that's so valuable that we want to illustrate is when either person gets triggered, they often fall into a response that creates more distance in the relationship. So I want to draw this figure up here. Yeah. Okay, so when couples get triggered, so just a hair more. I'm a little taller than Austin. So, okay, so there's a cycle that couples get stuck in. This is the reason why relationships stay stuck, is because when one person, most couples are used to interacting on the surface level. So let's say when she gets triggered, and this is a generalization, right? It's you can fill in the blanks with whatever fits for you. For some partners, they get really angry. Sometimes they attack or criticize. And there's so much pain there that they want the other person to also experience some of what they feel. So they, in this cycle, because it doesn't seem like the other person's responding, they get harsh and critical and attack. And this is, again, we're outlining the cycle of what it looks like when things don't go well. Because there are, of course, moments when you don't handle it in this way. You're able to do it in a way that feels balanced and grounded. But when things aren't going well, it's very easy for some spouses to go into that place. So when this happens, what happens for the guy is that they defend, or they blame, or minimize, or withdraw. So the more she attacks, the more upset she gets, the more he defends, puts up the wall, shuts down, goes within inside of himself and isolates and withdraws, which of course leads to more, why can't you hear me? Why do you always do this? Why can't you just listen to me? You're the one who always does this. Or it just goes back and forth, and the more she attacks, the more he defends. And there's this gridlock there. So the thing that many couples don't understand is what this pattern does to themselves and to the other person emotionally. And so what happens when, these are arrows, I don't know if you can see this very well. When she attacks or she blames, and this pattern can be flipped, I'm just generalizing, more women do this side, more men are withdraw and shut down and go inside. It can be flipped. But when she attacks and she gets angry and blames and gets upset, what happens is underneath the surface, on an emotional level, it comes down here and it impacts him. And the message he hears is, I'm bad, I'm not enough, and there's a sense of fear. Many times people feel so much pain because they get reminded she's getting so upset because I hurt her, and shame, which activates this pain for him. Without him being able to process through this in an effective way, it comes up above the surface and it shows up in this way. In response to him hurting and feeling like he's done something bad and he is bad, or he's scared that he's let you down again, he then defends or tries to withdraw to shut that down and tries to minimize what feels like what you're saying, but they try to minimize the pain that they're in. So the more that they minimize, again, it sends the message and it impacts the wife emotionally, and she feels even more not important, or not loved, alone, and fear. So the more afraid she feels, the more alone, not important, not loved, again, it comes up above the surface and it turns into this sense of anger to protest a lack of connection. There's so much pain in being alone. It's so scary to feel like your husband doesn't care that you do whatever you can to get some kind of a response. So it's easy to get louder, right? It's like, no, see my pain. Know that I'm here. Know that I'm hurting. Know that I want you to help me. But if it comes out in this way, again, it seems like an attack to him. It triggers more of the same. I'm being reminded again of how bad I am, how much I've messed up, how much I've hurt her. I feel like such a bad person. And then again, it does more of the same for him. He shuts down and withdraws. And this cycle can go on forever until whether there's a break or there's some kind of a resolution where you just kind of apologize, but it's on the surface level. You don't really get to what's underneath the surface here. And so linking this to what we were talking about earlier, when you get triggered as a partner, it's so crucial because this is what gets triggered down here. I'm reminded, and they also feel sometimes like I'm not enough, right? He was texting this other person or he was watching this other person. What does that mean about me? Do I not measure up for him? Am I not enough? I gave him everything and he still did that. So when partners get triggered, this is what's triggered. So best case scenario, the way to fully engage him, the easiest and fastest way to engage him is to share what this is. And doing your very best to notice what this is, try to slow it down enough so this doesn't pull you into it. But sharing with him, so what this might look like is, because one of the questions we had is like when a wife wants to build towards emotional, physical intimacy, and then immediately they get triggered and they're reminded of this other person. Well, what do you do? And so in those moments, what's so crucial is if you stop in that moment, instead of getting upset or attacking or shutting down and saying, nope, I'm not ready for this, I can't do this, it leaves this pain untapped and it's still unprocessed. So the next time you try to be intimate, the next time you try to feel close to their spouse, this gets triggered again. And then again, we can just shut that down and say, nope, we're not ready yet. We still need to go 90 more days or we still need more distance because I still feel scared. So best case scenario is you take this fear, you go to him with this and say, hey, I want to build this relationship with you. And as I considered being intimate tonight, I got scared because I was reminded of the past. I was reminded of that action, that behavior, and it felt like I was alone again. And when you share that with him in that way, it's so much easier for him to be able to step in and reassure you, especially if he's been working and he wants to do this in the fastest way, in the most effective way. It's easy for him. So again, if the guys are listening, the best thing that you can do in response to that is to say, I get it. I understand that what I did caused you pain. I can see how alone you have felt in the relationship. I can see how you felt like you weren't enough. But I want to reassure you that you are enough for me, that I do value our relationship, that I'm trying so hard to repair the damage, and I want you to feel safe to be able to grow closer to me. And so instead of shutting that feeling down, going to him with that, and he reassures you, that can help to bring down the intensity of the trigger. If you do this consistently, and if he's there consistently in this way, not only do the triggers decrease in intensity, but the triggers happen less frequently. And when they do show up, it's easier to not get sucked into this cycle. It's easier to continue to practice that skill of, I feel this pain, I feel triggered again, I'm reminded of the past, but really I feel hurt. Go to him with that. Share that with him. Engage him in this healing process. Because there's another thing that you can do, of course, right? This is a part of the message that we're trying to get out is, yes, there's a place for mindfulness. Yes, there's a place for journaling. That's so important. Individual recovery work is so important. But the thing that seems to be most overlooked as we work with couples is, like, the most untapped resource is the spouse. And so this is the best way that you can engage him and bring him closer to be able to reassure you and to be able to move forward.
Real quick, along those lines, one of the challenging parts of this is, right, we can get emotionally triggered in so many different ways, right? Like the wrong twinge of the eyebrow, the slightly wrong tone of voice, right? That can send such big messages to me that aren't really being sent, but I interpret them. And so often perception plays into this. And one of the challenges is we buy our own perception, right? Your I did this thing and that means you don't love me, right? And we do this happens. I think there's a lot of like value in understanding this cycle can be triggered by the addiction and the trauma, but this cycle is not because of the addiction and the trauma. Every single couple goes through this in various ways. And more so what I mean to say, every single couple that comes to therapy that's disconnected, they get stuck in this pattern. And we'll go into this maybe another time a little bit deeper, but it's important to understand this thing isn't happening because of addiction and trauma. It can get triggered by addiction and trauma, but it's important to separate that because healing the relationship is not addiction work. Healing the relationship is relationship work, okay? And the other piece of this that I just want to give a maybe a valuable tool for each of you, and I'll speak specifically to the men because of my own experience, but I would get triggered quite frequently into believing my wife didn't love me. I wasn't good enough. She was going to reject me. She was going to abandon me. And it could be the simplest thing, but I 100% felt it in my body, right? And there came a point where, we were doing fairly well and my wife was like loving me again and, trusting me again. But I still like felt like, gosh, I'm just not good enough. Like how can she love me kind of thing. And I remember specifically one time in the car, and I kind of made a plan to do this the next time it happened, but we were in the car and she said something about like, hey, can you slow down? Right. And all this stuff rose up in me. And I'm like, oh, you're always mad about my driving, whatever. Right. And I started to have these thoughts. She thinks I'm an idiot. I don't know how to drive. Right. And so I kind of like calmed myself and I turned to her and I said, hey, I'm feeling like you think I'm the biggest loser in the world right now and that you don't really love me. And I'm like, is that accurate? And she kind of looked at me and she's like, just asked you to slow down. I was like, but you don't think I'm an idiot? And she's like, no. And right, I had all my shame. Everything inside me was telling me I was right. And so I was like, you're sure? And she's like, yeah, I just wanted you to slow down. I thought I saw a cop. And I'm like, I can't always trust my insides. I have to learn to trust her with what she's saying. And I kept doing that for a long time. I just check myself. And in time, I realized this woman loves me. I am good enough. I've been doing good work. And I don't have to carry all this shame with me all the time. And so if you can internally slow it down and check with each other, I'm perceiving that XYZ. Is this right? Let's say sometimes it is right. I'm perceiving that you're mad at me and you don't want to be close. Well, you're right. I don't. Like you're making me upset. But then you can talk through that. What's making you upset, right? Well, why? What happened? And then you're having some dialogue and you're working through it as a couple instead of like fighting and going off on your own.
So I wanted to answer Ruth's question. I think that's a great point, right? For those who can't see it, she says, I believe I've shared my feelings in that vulnerable way and have brought back the pain of the past, but my husband still comes back to I'm bad, the fear and the shame, and I still feel alone. And hearing about that pain, or even hearing about my pain is all about him. Okay, sure. It's a very common thing. Good question. So I think the thing in my own relationship that helped me to address that place, because my wife, she used to go to shame pretty frequently. I felt the same exact way. when I shared, this is what happened for me, this is what I felt sad, she would flip it on me and say something about, well, you did this to me. Or, yeah, here we go again. Yep, I'm the bad wife again. Here we go. Thanks for bringing this up again. And there would be just like this, I don't know, not almost like this fury boil up inside of me because of the same thing that you said, is I felt even more alone. And so what we did together, what I had to do in response to that is I had to share with her, listen, when I tell you this doesn't mean you're a bad wife. You're a good wife. That's why I'm coming to you, is because I want your reassurance. I just want support. I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think that there's something wrong with you. And as we did that consistently, she was able to stay present. And sometimes it still happens, but I don't get triggered in the same way anymore. It's not as intense of a pushback. It's just like, okay, this is happening again. What I need from you is I just need a hug. I just need to hear that it's okay and that you made a mistake and you're sorry. And so I think by helping to reassure him in those moments that when you're sending that message of I'm hurting, it doesn't mean he's a bad person. The more you hear that, the more you follow up with that, the easier it gets for him to stay present with you.
And this is a really challenging part for relationships because, right, you're trying to reach, you're trying to be vulnerable. I hear this a lot from women, and men, this is important for you to hear. Women are pretty dang brave in being vulnerable with their emotions. It takes a lot to come to somebody that has betrayed them and say, I want closeness still. I want you to meet my needs still. It's important for us guys to recognize that when she's coming to you, like, that's the best thing ever. She's coming to you saying, I want you to be here with me. And so allowing that shame to dissipate and go, she's asking me for her needs to be met. That means she wants me to meet her needs. Like, that's a good thing. And just to know, and this can happen on both sides, but when shame becomes the block, right, and your need becomes about my failure, so often there needs to be some work about loving self and some self-compassion. And Sam and I will go into that, in another arena, but very often when this problem happens, what it comes down to, and I see this a lot with guys and sometimes partners, is because of the behaviors done in the addiction and things. I see these guys that just don't love themselves, and so they can't believe that she loves them and wants them close. And so a partner's saying, hey, let's get close. I want you to meet my needs. Let's be friends. And he goes, I'm not good enough. I just suck. And he beats himself up. And it's like, you may not have been worthy. You may not have been good enough, but you're working on it, hopefully. And she wants this with you, which is, I think, what most people want. We want to be wanted. We want to be cared about. So my hope is when you see her coming to you, even if she doesn't do it perfectly, she's a little upset, the fact that she's coming to you is great news. Okay, so the next piece is how to develop trust in someone who has been dishonest. Okay, and one of the challenges here is how do you trust someone who's lied to you? How do you know for sure if they're being honest, if they're doing recovery work, if they're sober, right? And the first thing I want to speak to that, and we don't talk about this a lot, but it's really important. One of the common effects of trauma is, yes, I can't trust my partner anymore. But the other deeper one is something like, how do I trust myself now? Because I did trust you, and I was wrong. You hurt me. You lied to me. Now when I want to trust you again, right, how do I do that? This is why this is important to engage as a couple, because trust is something that is built by meeting needs and taking steps to meet needs. And so this question comes up a lot. And if you have a partner, man, if you're engaging in this, honesty has to be like not just about acting out, about feelings, about struggles. Honesty is how we start to build trust. And we're going to do a whole thing on trust at some point. But going back to that thing I drew of the baseline, again, trust is not happiness and connection. We need that first. And so one of the thoughts I have in developing trust in someone who has been dishonest is sharing, again, Sam kind of touched on this, is sharing the effects of the dishonesty. And I will tell you, men, I've worked, and Sam has as well, I've worked with men who have, um, betrayed in really, hard ways. And what I hear from those partners is, I get that you acted out and I'm not okay with it. I'm not happy about it. What I can't do is lies. I can't do lies. And so for you partners, where it's hard to trust, I think it's okay to share what you need to be able to trust. Things like, I need to be able to look in your phone. I need to, and that stuff's okay. A lot of partners don't want to do that, which is fine. But it's okay to share what you need, what you think will help you trust again. And man, again, if you can see this as, hey, I have an opportunity to meet her need so we can be close. It's not because I'm a bad guy. It's not because whatever. It's because she wants to be close again and she needs to trust me. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think so. It's very difficult when you're not sure what he's doing is sincere or if he's just saying the right things or doing the right things, and it's tough because you can't really know. But one of the things that I'll kind of explain to clients is, how do you know if he's telling the truth? How do you know if he's being honest? What I'll say is that honesty it's like a package deal, where you can't be consistently acting out, you can't be hiding, you can't be emotionally disconnected, and be honest at the same time. And the opposite is also true. Like if you're present emotionally, if you're consistently working, you're trying your best to be the kind of spouse that your wife needs, like honesty follows those things. So I think it's less about trying to figure out and pin him down in some kind of a, like it's so difficult for spouses to feel this fear of, I don't know if he's being honest. And so something that we'll see a lot is they'll try to focus on every word that he says, try to catch him in, okay, well, you said this once, and then 10 minutes ago you said it in this way. It's exhausting for partners. So part of, again, what can be more helpful as a measuring stick to know if he's being honest is, what are the other, is he engaged emotionally? Is he trying, is he doing his recovery work? Is he trying to validate your pain? Like those are a better way to gauge his efforts in recovery than trying to figure out which thing he's saying that may or may not be true.
Again, real quick, going back to this baseline thing I drew, right? And this is important for the men to understand. Our goal here is not sobriety, and it's not just trust. I don't want my partner to just trust me. I want her to feel loved by me. I want her to feel cared for by me. And I see this all the time, where a partner starts to heal and get healthy. It gets to this point where it's like, I don't just want this anymore. I don't want to just be able to trust you. I want to be able to connect with you, bond with you, feel like you're my friend. I want to feel like you understand my needs. And so over-focusing on just honesty, right? That's that baseline. When I married you, I expected you to be honest to me, right? And so, men, if you start to focus on here, yes, be honest, but if you focus on meeting the needs, okay, that is one of the quicker ways to build trust, because I can trust your presence when you're meeting my need because I know you're meeting it. But if we're not talking and we're not connecting and you're just telling me you're sober, you might be sober, but that still doesn't meet my need. Okay, does that make sense, everyone?
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, questions. We love questions. We want to hear. Okay, we got a couple of people who are, okay, go ahead. Let's read this.
And what if he's not being honest? What if you consistently catch him in lies? Would you still keep going to him, or would you stop? Is there a space and time when you don't reach out? I would say absolutely. Risking and being able to risk, we need safety. And if it's not safe, right, we put ourselves in a spot of pain. And so there comes a spot with boundaries, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you're going to him and he can't reach you, he can't meet to you, you can try and reach across the table, not with the need, but being a little bit curious and going like, hey, I keep coming to you because I care about you, and I want us to be close, or I want us to heal, I want to feel better. What makes it hard for you to do that? Or what happens for you when I share these needs? Again, this is not necessarily the the easiest thing to do, because this starts to feel like a partner's doing all the work, which we see a lot of. And Sam and I are really trying to work on some things that help get guys engaged in this process. But I would counsel you, like, if someone's not willing to be there with you and meet your needs, you can only reach so long. Anything to add with that?
Just one thought. I think one of the most effective ways to reach is to share the emotional impact that the lies have on you. I remember working with a couple just recently where I had her share, instead of it going into the sense of anger, right? I can't trust you. How can you always lie to me? Which there is anger there, of course, to feel lied to and to feel betrayed and consistently not feel like you have the truth and be honest. There will be anger there. So I think one of the ways to engage him or to break through whatever it is that kind of leads him to lie is to share again how deeply that hurts, to feel like you don't feel close and loved and cared for by this person. When you share the sadness and the fear in that, that's the fastest way to break through those walls. Because if we have that figure eight thing up above on the board, if you share from above the surface as I'm so angry you keep doing this and how can you keep letting me down, if you share from underneath the surface, it gets through in a way that anger could never. And so I would encourage you, as you do share, to share more again on the emotional lines and linking the sadness that you feel to his importance. So let me just give you one more, for instance, and then we can go to the next thing. So if you say, hey, when you're not honest with me, it crushes me because I value our relationship and I want to feel close to you. But when there are lies in the relationship, I can't get close to you, and that's so devastating because you're important to me. Sharing in that way can make a shift inside of him, I think, again, faster than almost anything else.
So the next thing we want to talk about is this idea of building intimacy, both emotionally and sexually and spiritually, I would say. And one of the challenges here is fear, right? It's really scary to risk giving your heart back to someone who you thought had it and didn't take care of it. And so in this idea in rebuilding intimacy, sorry. So one of the dangers for a lot of women around like physical intimacy is it's highly triggering, right? His addiction was sexual behavior, and being intimate reminds of that. One of the things to remember, and we say this to men all the time, and this is true, their acting out sexual isn't about sex. It just as easily could be heroin or cocaine, and we're not trying to minimize that it is sex. That makes it more painful. But it just happens to be something that he learned to use to get high. Now, remembering that doesn't make it safe necessarily, but starting to recognize that what you have to offer by being intimate, and that's more than just physical, is you are offering you, right? If he was looking at pornography or even with another person, he was connecting to sex. And a lot of women they struggle because they feel like maybe they're not pretty enough or maybe they're not good enough or whatever. And for you, if you want to rebuild intimacy but you're scared, I think it's important for you to see the good in you, that you have a heart to offer, you have a soul, you have kindness and love. And he never got that in his addiction. No matter how much he was acting out, he never got love and care and friendship. And really, when we work with men, what we find is that's what they're seeking in a faulty way. They're seeking connection through sex. And so even being sexual, so much of what we're after is this intimacy. And then the type of sex, the frequency, that doesn't matter, because when we're feeling loved and cared for, then being intimate is an expression of what we already have. And a lot of times in recovery, and men with addictions often do this, like, let's be sexual so we connect, right? And in recovery, a healthy way to approach this is, let's connect and be there with each other and understand each other, and then let's express it through intimacy, what we already have, okay? One more thing with that, if you're triggered, and this is where the relational healing comes into play, open up about that. I've had a lot of couples where they want to heal, they're working on this together, and she might stop it during intimacy and say, I just got triggered. I need to know that you're still here with me. I'm just remembering how painful this used to be. And you men being able to see that you can be there for her in that moment. And being able to say, you know, I am sorry that I hurt you. I'm here with you now. I love you, right? I'm glad we're, you know, working together, whatever. But like being there in that moment, wife, if you you know, push that down, and just kind of betray yourself, and you keep going through the motions of sex, but you're not present, right? That's going to create more resentment and more fear for sex the next time. And so oftentimes I tell couples, have a rebuilding phase where you understand the goal is not orgasm or intercourse. The goal is we're communicating, we're being there with where each other is.
Yes, I can't underscore enough. I hope you heard what he said, in that when you get triggered, whether it's during intimacy or anything else, to go to him in that moment and share on an emotional level, like he said, I'm reminded of the past. I feel sad. This is painful for me. That's so crucial to do, instead of shutting it down, keeping it to yourself. And like he said, you can either go one way with it and keep going with it and just be checked out and you're not there. Or you can just say, nope, we're not doing this tonight. And like, I need space, go away. Like that's almost just as unhelpful, because that pain is unprocessed. So I can't, again, emphasize enough going to him in the moment that you feel triggered and have him support you in it. And that doesn't mean that you'll intimacy will start again that same night or that same moment. It might just be, I need help processing through that pain. So I thought it was really important.
Again, I want to reiterate this, that one of the most important parts to healing the relationship is rebuilding that trust. And I really just want to go back to that very first place, because even rebuilding sexually, so often people are trying to do that on their own, right? This is your intimate relationship. This is your sexual relationship. It's not his, it's not hers, it's yours. So you're working together to create our relationship, right? Oftentimes when a guy's in an addiction, his addiction is dominating sexuality. He's manipulating, he's pressuring, he's right, whatever. And in this repair process, it's discovering what works for us to connect, right? It's okay to have preferences, but if my preference doesn't create safety for you, like then the goal's not being reached. We're not connecting, right? And so it's really important to understand that the best way to heal any part of the relationship is to work on it together, and for you men to remember that you can be a source of this, better than coming and seeing me and Sam, better than EMDR, better than a betrayal trauma group, right? Better than anything out there, it's you. And we want you to gain that confidence and skill of how to be there with that pain.
All right, so any other last questions here? Great question. Hi, TC. Okay. The last thing that we want to cover tonight, then we'll let you go. We'll just spend the last few minutes going over this. What do you do if he's not willing to address your pain? If you're in a relationship where he doesn't think that porn is a problem, he doesn't think that texting some other girl is a problem, or whatever the behavior is that you're hurt by, how do you build a relationship with that? So number one, like that's obviously very, very difficult. And when they deny the fact that they're hurting you, you feel even more alone, which creates more distance in the relationship, and it causes more pain. So one of the things that can be so helpful in those instances is taking a step back in terms of making the discussion about porn or about the act of betrayal. If you go a little bit more general and you express what it's like to feel disconnected from that person. What is it like to not have the kind of relationship that you wanted to have specifically with that person? It's not about porn or whatever else. That's a problem, of course. But so often when the guys keep hearing, you did this and that hurt me, how could you do this? It just creates more shame, which again, going back to that figure eight cycle, the more shame they feel, the more they're going to push away. And so instead of creating a consistent dialogue around the pain of the behavior and consistently harping on the behavior, going to him and sharing, I feel sad when we're not close, when we don't get to spend time repairing our relationship and feeling like we matter to each other. That's so hard for me because I want to have that relationship with you. And when it feels like there's distance between us, like that's hard. And as you express it again underneath the surface and share those things, and it becomes less about the act of betrayal and more about the effect of it, again, the pain of feeling alone because the other person matters, again, there's a shift in the dialogue. And many times the guys are more likely to engage on that level than to keep hearing about more and more the pain of what they did to betray them.
And with that cycle, that figure eight that we drew, I'm just going to be really transparent. As therapists, what we're trying to do in couples therapy is we are trying to help you recognize the cycle and the part you each play into it, and we're trying to help you unite against it. This cycle is what gets in our way. It's not that you're a bad person or you're a bad person. It's that we get triggered. We don't know how to do this triggering thing. And so if you can see, like, we've been in this thing for 15 years and it's hurting both of us. I'm not happy, you're not happy. How do we recognize this thing that we get into and slow it down and say, oh, we're in that thing again. This is where I do this and you do this. Like Sam and I can ask a couple in therapy what happens. And she goes, I do this and he does that. And when he does that, I do this, right? They can outline it because they've done it for years. So being able to identify that and say, we don't want to do this anymore. What I want is I want to connect with you. And I'm scared. I don't know how to get there, but I want to connect with you. That can help step it out and go, me too. Let's unite against this thing. And it's really important also, this is what we started with, this idea of uniting against the addiction, against the trauma, and against the cycle. Our assumption here, and I recognize all of you on here aren't in this spot, but when both people want it, our goal is to help you get it. When one of you doesn't want it, it's challenging. And so I want to just speak to that. And this isn't Austin the therapist, okay? This is Austin the guy who's been addicted and caused a big mess in my marriage. For you guys who don't think that your pornography watching is a problem, I don't get why this hurts. It's not a real affair. I'm just online or whatever. One of the most important things I can tell you is if it hurts your wife, it doesn't matter if you understand it. She's your wife, right? Like, this is the woman that you committed to, that you told her you'd take care of her, that you told her you love her, you'd be there for her feelings. And so if you don't understand it, it doesn't mean that she's crazy or that it's nonsense. I would encourage you to try to understand why this hurts her. Does it cause her to feel not beautiful? Does it cause her to feel not important? Does it cause her to feel like, she'll never be good enough for you? Try to understand why instead of saying like, well, hey, that's your problem. Because what will happen is she will leave you. She will get healthy through recovery things, because women seek recovery much more often than men. She will get healthy and she will say, I deserve better than someone that doesn't care about my needs, that doesn't care about my pain. And you may be numb and not care about that right now, and I see that. I would just ask you to recognize that this is a person that you committed to that cares about you and that wants, like, they want to meet your needs. They want happiness. You might not always see that, but I see that with all the women that come in. If they're trying, it's because they want a happy marriage. And so I encourage you to try to understand her pain and choose her over porn. Like, don't try to make them both work. You don't have to understand why it doesn't work. I will tell you that I've done this for 6 years. It doesn't work. I'm going to give one example here. It's a little more extreme. I had a woman who said, I don't care if he watches porn. Go ahead and watch all the porn you want. It wasn't a moral thing for her, right? It was not right? And then he went in and watched all this porn and lied about it. And what happened was, she said, I was okay with you watching porn, but you lied. Now how do I trust you? And all this comes down to trust. When you married her, she believed you weren't watching other people having sex. And you betrayed that. And whether it's moral or not, that trust has been betrayed. And nobody can connect in a relationship without trust. It doesn't work that way. We don't risk, we don't bond. So I'm not trying to shame you men for whatever, but it's important to understand, like, there's so much better to a real wife, a real woman, than the screen. And it's worth working for that intimacy and that closeness. That's my little rant. So we appreciate you guys coming. Are there any last questions before we end? We don't Sometimes webinars drag on forever. We want to answer your questions if you have them, but we don't want to keep you all night. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
So I guess my little thing that I would say, we're so excited about helping couples use the relationship as a resource to heal. Because again, it's such an untapped resource because couples just don't understand how to do it. So I hope that as you've listened tonight, you've gotten a couple ideas or at least one thing that's resonated that's going to help you work towards engaging your spouse in a different way to be able to unite that person against the addiction, against the trauma, against the cycle that you find yourselves in. Because this is a big part of what we want to keep sharing. We want to create content. We want to do these webinars. We want to answer questions because we've seen how effective it is when couples finally understand how to use the marriage, how to use the relationship to be able to heal individually. Because there's nothing that works faster to heal trauma than to engage the husband. There's no greater buffer against addiction than a secure connection with his wife. And so it's very easy to get stuck and to spin your wheels. So again, we hope that we've been able to address some of these questions that you've had. Looks like there aren't any other questions.
Just one last thought real quick with what Sam said. Speaking from experience, I tried to do it alone. I think my wife tried to do it alone for a long time. And when we started to work together, even outside of therapy, like, right, us therapists, we get maybe 50 minutes a week with you. We get these little snapshots and we're trying to help. If you two can come together and say, this thing's broken, but I want it to be good, let's work together and create this. Like if you can take that step together, what took me and my wife probably a solid 6 years of struggling and multiple therapists and groups and all this stuff, constantly trying. If you can come together sooner, healing can happen much quicker. And that's when we started to work together and express these feelings. Just got better and better and better. And we have a dip and we have to work through that and better and better. So one last question.
Okay, Heather, I just saw your message. Okay, so let's answer this. So you said, okay, can you bypass the trust and connect? So to connect, to form trust. And secondly, when you repeatedly are vulnerable and share your pain honestly, but he continues to lie and doesn't fully reciprocate, you're left feeling even more alone than before.
That's true. Real quick, one thought with that. I'm going to let Sam expand on that more, but this is a note on vulnerability. I see a lot of times, and I'm not saying, Heather, that this is what you're doing, but this is something to be aware of. I see a lot of times where people go, I'm being vulnerable with you, I'm sharing my feelings. And they say something like, I'm so mad at you that you're never there for me, right? And that's a real feeling, right? But the vulnerable feeling is what that causes for you, right? When you're not there for me, I feel like I'm not important, I'm not loved. That's kind of those more tender feelings. And it's hard to go there without safety, right? Safety is what helps us connect. And if I'm reaching and you're saying, I don't care, it's going to be really hard to bypass true connection to build trust. The way that all relationships start out is they're insecure. I don't know if you're safe for me. I risk a little bit, you risk a little bit, I share a little bit, you share a little bit. And then we go, oh, this person I can do this emotional opening up with. That's what starts to create trust. To just connect and spend time together can help, but typically we protect ourselves when we don't feel that we can trust the person to be there with us. Let Sam have his thoughts on that.
No, I think that's right. It's such a hard thing because there's you can't do it by yourself. Like as much as you try to do your part, there is that's the part of the relationship. That's why they're so difficult, is because when you're vulnerable and the other person isn't responding, they keep hurting you. Like you can't create that solid relationship without his help. So again, a part of what can help engage him is if you, and maybe you've already tried to do this, maybe you have, but my thought is if you share with him what that feels like for you, when it feels like you keep trying and you want so much to connect with him because he's important to you, but he still lies, like helping him understand that it hurts you because he matters to you. And then I would be so curious as to get to what it is that causes him to lie. Like, why is he continuing to do that? Is it because of shame? And if that's the case, he can come to you with his pain of not feeling enough or his fear of letting you down. So it's, again, as he describes in couples therapy, we want to figure out, we understand what's at the top, right? He lies, and so I might get angry, or I might share really vulnerably and do it excellently, and then it triggers something in him, so he lies some more and defends. So I'd be very curious to get to what's underneath that for him, because once you get to that, then you can create shifts, because he already knows he shouldn't lie. He already knows that that hurts you, but getting to that part with him. So maybe that's a part of what you can do in the relationship, is ask him, like, what causes you to do this? Like, why do you find yourself lying? And if you try to do it from like this open, like, I'm just curious, I want to understand this, it can help him to try to make sense of it as well on his side.
Well, we appreciate you being with us. If you could really quickly, we'd love to know if this has been helpful. You can do a thumbs down if it hasn't. We're okay. We want to know. We want this to be valuable. Also, this can bring up more questions, right? So I think you've been submitting your questions to Sam. If you have more, do that.
Please.
We want to be a resource of helping. We're so excited because, right, there's so much hope for healing. There's a better way to do this than on your own. And we want to share this because we see brave couples that go, this relationship we're fighting for and we want it. And I see one of my biggest passions is those people that are looking and striving and trying to get it and not getting it. Sam and I's hope is that we can fill in the blanks and go, here's what's been missing, here's how to do it, and you can have the marriage you want, and the joy and the connection. Each of you deserve it. Guy struggling with addiction or had addiction, and partner. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Nice to do this with you. So we'll talk soon. Again, post any questions you might have. We love answering them. All right, take care.